Lovely.
Welcome to, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just do the housekeeping and stuff. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So my name is Mutarika Priksapong from UNDR office, Global Education and Training Institute. We also serve as the Global Secretariat of the MCR 2030. So we would like to welcome you back to the MCR 2030 webinar. Today, we will be featuring one of the tools provided by the service provider of MCR 2030, focusing on the critical assets management system that would help you to be able to prevent the cascading failures of critical assets. And today's session will be 60 minutes with French interpretation available also if you click the globe icon at the bottom. The session will be recorded and the presentation also will be shared in the event page. You can see the URL on the left side of the screen here, also with the QR code. At the end of the session, we also would like you to help fill in the post-webinar survey so that we can use your feedback to improve also the subsequent sessions of the webinars that we will be organizing. And lastly, we will be utilizing the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions that you would like to direct to the speakers. So we begin now. Then I would like to also pass the floor to Mr. Sanjaya Bhatia, Head of Office for Northeast Asia and Global Education and Training Institute of UNDRR for the welcome messages. Over to you, Sanjaya.
Thank you, Mai, and welcome to all the participants for this webinar, which is focusing on a tool which is known as the Critical Asset Management System to build resilience, very much related to urban resilience. As you all know, this is under the aegis of the Making Cities Resilient 2030 Global Initiative, which UNDRR is facilitating along with a large number of partners, including World Bank, UN Habitat, UNDP, World Council, City Data, C40, and others. This tool has been developed with the help of another network, which is known as the ARISE, which is a private sector engagement facility. And in MCR 2030, private sector plays a very, very important role because it is from the private sector that the cities can get the tools and the services and the applications that would help them in achieving greater resilience. So today we have Luke Feeney, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of TerminusDB, and Kitty Joes, the Senior Knowledge Engineer, TerminusDB. So I'd now like to hand over to Luke, and as he and Kitty present, if you have any questions, please put in the Q&A, and we'll have time dedicated for questions and answer later. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Luke Feeney. As said, I'm the COO and co-founder of TerminusDB. TerminusDB is working with the ARISE network to develop the CAMS tool. Just to give a little bit of introduction into who we are a university spin-out based here in Dublin in Ireland. So we spun out of university, Trinity College Dublin, a few years ago, building data intensive applications to improve things, and CAMS is one of those applications. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. There's the watchword of the modern era. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So yeah, as I say, this is the Critical Asset Management System developed with ARISE, the Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies. It's a voluntary organization set up by the UNDRR to help public-private collaboration. And it's a global network. It has chapters. The ones that we're working with primarily are the US and Canadian chapters to develop CAMS. And there's a bunch of previous projects that you can check out at that link. So the partners in this project are TerminusDB, who I represent. We are an open source graph database company. So we build collaborative data applications using TerminusDB, which is an open source database developed in Trinity College in Dublin, and now run out of Dublin, which is, I'll tell everybody around the world. I saw a few people from Mallorca and Turkey posting sunshines in the chat, and it is grey and wet and miserable here in Dublin. So we're hoping for spring to come soon to this part of the world. We're also working with BGC Engineering, who are a big engineering firm, versus, and obviously as a big engineering firm, they have a lot of experience of critical asset management, versus who are an AI company, Data Acquia, which is a data consultancy. So a lot of technical knowledge from across a range of organizations are helping to build out this tool. So the problem that we're looking at really is about identifying assets that that are critical, and getting tools so you can find which ones could affect your disaster resilience, and then understanding where the chains are. And what we mean by failure chains really is, if a specific asset falls, what are the consequences further on in my system? If a lightning strike hits a radio tower, what are the problems? If a hurricane hits an electricity substation, what are the dependent assets on that, and how do they fit into my critical resilience plan? So really, it's that problem and the problem of connectedness that we're trying to help to solve. So as you can see here, it's this identifying potential failure nodes within the network that could trigger those failure chains. And you can see in the graphic there, the sorts of connections that we're talking about. And Kitty, when she presents the tool itself in demo, you'll see some of these examples. So in that example there, you can see that the power plant and communication towers are nodes that, if they're damaged, then there's a whole chain of failure around that. So the evacuation route, the signals, the port, the hospital, and the water treatment plant are all dependent assets on that. And obviously those are all incredibly critical. And so the idea is that you'd get a much better idea of what you should prioritize in terms of immediate response to a disaster. There's no point, repairing the hospital if it can't come back online because the power plant is still down. So what we mean by a critical asset, we'll share these slides afterwards so people can have a look through this in some more detail, but I won't go through it entirely here. It's really any structure, assembly, or feature which, if damaged or lost, would reduce the resilience of a city or state in the face of a disaster or the aftermath. And I'd add community to that as well, because we would like to make the tool available to communities as well as cities and states. So what we're building is a simple, free, highly secure software tool that enables cities or states to inventory their critical assets. So make sure that you know what critical assets you have, identify the hazards to which each asset is exposed. So you can understand, if there's a landslide, these are the assets that might be exposed. If there's a hurricane, these are the ones that might be exposed. If there's a flood, these are the ones that might be exposed. Map those relationships between those assets so that you can understand those chains, identify the potential failure chains, and then use that output in other tools. So try and link across so that emergency control systems can understand how to prioritize based on what you're seeing within the critical asset management system, and then prioritize, plan, and mitigate. So that's really the last point there is really, I think, very important, because you really are trying to get a full and complete picture so that you can understand what you need to prioritize and invest in. So it's highly secure. We know that some of this data can be quite sensitive and quite critical about which assets are where and how they're linked together. So one of the things that we've really focused on when we're building the tool is granular access control and really strong security. So you can see the way that we've set it up is that there's no independent way to become a member of a critical asset management system team. an administrator has to provide you with access. You can request access from a link, but that has to then be granted by the core administrator. They can then follow a link in an email that gets sent out to them. They're forced to set a very strict password. Then they can log into CAMS, and the administrator can alter, access, or remove the user at any time. And we have role-based access control, which is a simple but secure and manageable approach. You can see that we have quite granular control. So people some people may only be data readers, so they can only see part of the data. Some people may be schema readers only, so they can see the structure of the data, but no access to the data within, and all the way up to admin. And then if the cloud version of the tool is used, which we host, it's built in very secure by design, built-in protection and encryption to make sure that information is really very secure. So we build security through layers that deliver defense in depth. So how CAMS will be made available? It's fully open source. You can go today to GitHub and download a version of CAMS. It's with a very permissive Apache 2 license, so that can be used by anybody without any cost. We are growing a cadre of CAMS volunteers to add additional functionality. You can see there's a link there, which we'll share the slides as well, so everybody can have a look at that. So we're looking, to try and increase the functionality all the time via voluntary efforts to make sure that we're responding to what people really need in the field when they're deploying and using the tool. And it's available now in the MCR2030 dashboard. So you can go in and have a look after the call. I think we can provide a link to that. Then there's CAMS as a service, which is available in the cloud. It's guaranteed availability. And again, that's delivered by TerminusDB, and we have some cloud hosting costs, so we're delivering that pro bono for up to 2 years, and then we'll see where we're at that point. But of course, you can just host it yourself in your own data center or on a computer locally, and we're only too happy to help with that. So the demonstration that GETI is going to give in a moment, it's going to have 3 scenarios. We're, as I'll mention on the next slide, we're working with the island of Dominica. So it's focused on some of the issues that a Caribbean island might face, especially one that had enormous problems with Hurricane Maria. So prior to hurricane season, updating asset records, then when the hurricane is approaching, the steps that we take in order to respond, and then planning once the hurricane season is done. So kind of trying to take it through a full cycle within the tool and how you would manage that and think about it. So this is just some of the feedback that we've gotten from Dominica so far. So what it means to Dominica, so it's the increased data to strengthen decision-making by stakeholders. It's the enhanced protection of critical assets, lives and livelihoods. And as I say, Dominica was badly impacted by Hurricane Maria and understands that due to shifting climate patterns, that hurricanes are going to become a more common problem, and that they need to build systems in order to be able to respond and become more resilient to those shifts. The increased success in public-private partnerships for enhanced resilience. So this is, again, it's this partnership model between ARISE, ourselves, and the government of Dominica to maximize success and fulfilling the priorities of the Sendai framework to reduce the lives affected, mortality and economic losses and damages to critical infrastructure. So yes, we're looking to attract progressive, innovative communities, nations, cities that know they need to improve their resilience. We want to meet that need, and anybody that is interested can greatly contribute to the design and development of the tool. And we have a fully available, fully operational tool, but we're looking to extend it. We're looking to increase its coverage so that it meets more needs, and definitely you can be part of shaping that future. And that'll enable us to build a really quality tool with high utility for you as well as other countries and communities. Great. So let me just, can you still see my screen? I hope you can. because I just want to very
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Great. I just want to very quickly click across and just have a quick look at, here's the website of CAMS. It's climateresilient.world. So this is just a website that we set up just to give a quick overview of what CAMS is, and some videos about building CAMS. And here is the GitHub repository where all the code lives, and you can see that it's all fully open source and fully available for anybody that wants to go in and use it. Great. So I, at that point, will stop. And if there are any questions, I'm only too happy to answer now.
So no questions yet. I think let's go into the demo and the scenarios as you were mentioning.
Great. Sounds fantastic. GETI, you're up.
Okay, everybody see my screen?
Yes, it's
Yes.
clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so hello everybody. So as Luke mentioned, I'm going to walk you guys through 4 scenarios where CAMS would be understanding the impact of a disaster event on your critical asset infrastructure. So this is like the CAMS dashboard. This is how it looks, and we have an equivalent mobile view as well. Anyway, so let's dive in. And the scenarios which I'm going to demonstrate right now are based on the map of Dominica, and the data which we're going to show is like example data which we've extracted from Google Maps. Now, these purple markers are assets which I have already entered previously for the sake of the demo. Right. So the first scenario is prior to hurricane season, when an operator creates a new asset, which is an electrical substation. So an operator would go to the assets tab there and would click on load asset. And here is where we are going to create a brand new asset. So as I mentioned, our asset in interest is an electrical substation, and we are going to place this in a place called as Castle Bruce in Dominica. So let's go ahead and create this asset. So I'm going to assign the asset type as an electrical power generating plant. And then I'm just going to quickly fill all these mandatory fields there. So I'll just fasten up there. I'm just entering some data. Right, and now let's just go and enter the coordinates of Castle Bruce electrical substation. So let me just grab that from here. Okay, so let's click on submit. And so here is where we have created our new asset, which is Castle Bruce electrical substation. We can view it in a map, and it's based in a place called Castle Bruce. Let me just show you the equivalent mobile version as well. So this is the asset which we just created right now. There. Okay. So the operator then creates the links from the substation to other assets, those dependent on it and those that is dependent upon. So the operator will go to links tab there and click here where load link is there. And here we are going to create links from this particular substation to other assets. So let me just talk a bit about these links here. So in this first scenario, we are going to create 4 links in which I'm going to base these 2 assets, which is Belaise Primary School and a communications tower near Good Hope. So I'm going to place these 2 assets to be directly dependent on Castle Bruce electrical substation. And I'm going to make Castle Bruce electrical substation dependent on Trafalgar hydropower plant and Petro Caribbean radio tower. So let's go and create all of these 4 links. I'm going to critical, and what I mean by critical is that if something happens to Castle Bruce electrical substation, then these 2 assets will directly fall. It's directly impacted, right? So let's make Belaise Primary School directly dependent on Castle Bruce electrical substation. So I'm just going to search the select there. So
GETI,
we create, yes.
Can you go up just slightly slower, because we have
so
interpretation also, so that they need to keep up. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, apologies. I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Right. So I'm going to create the second link. So hold on. And I am going to make this asset dependent on Castle Bruce electrical substation. So tower near Good Hope, I'm going to make it directly dependent on Castle Bruce electrical substation. And there we go. So we created two links. Now let's create the links in which Castle Bruce electrical substation is directly dependent on. So let me go ahead and create those two links as well. In this case, I'm going to make Castle Bruce electrical substation be dependent on Trafalgar hydropower plant. And now for the last link, I'm going to make Castle Bruce electrical substation dependent on Petro Caribbean radio tower. Okay, so we have all of these four links here in which these two assets are dependent on Castle Bruce electrical substation, and Castle Bruce electrical substation is dependent on Trafalgar hydropower plant and Petro Caribbean radio tower. Right, cool. So now that the assets and its relationship with other assets have been added, we can now go to the Home tab and view it on the map. So first of all, I'm going to select the asset which we just created, which is Castle Bruce electrical substation. I'm going to click on that, right? Now here you can see how a failure to the substation would impact other assets, right? So now if we click on failure path here, we can also see how these assets in turn may impact other infrastructure further down the line. If I click on upward links there, then we would get a whole picture of the assets which are directly dependent on and dependent upon of Castle Bruce electrical substation, the new asset which we just created right now. Anyway, so now that the operator has entered the new asset, which is Castle Bruce electrical substation, and the links to other assets, those who are planning for hurricane season can immediately see the impact of the new substation to Dominica's other existing assets. So that's the end of the first scenario, right? So I'm going to reset the map and I'm moving forward to scenario 2. So our scenario 2 is in the time, we are moving forward to the time of hurricane season. And in this scenario, we look at how CAMS can be used when you know something like a hurricane is going to happen. So imagine the situation in which like a hurricane is approaching from the west side of Dominica, and the hurricane has been forecasted to be of category 3. So in preparation to this, the operator opens CAMS to assess the possible impact. Now in the map view, the operator chooses the type of event Dominica is facing. And in this example, it is a hurricane. So as you can see, the map displays the assets that could be impacted, and it's color-coded as well based on the grade. So the operator can also use these grading system to show the assets impacted by severity level. So if I click on category 2, then we would see only Dominica Air and Sea Ports Authority is the only asset which is likely to fall if a hurricane of category 3 is going to approach. But in our example, we are dealing with a hurricane of category 3. So in this case, we display all of the assets which could be directly impacted with a hurricane category 3 type. Anyway, so the operator can then click on an asset to display the assets reliant on it. Then if we click on failure path there, right. If we click on failure path there, we can go further down and see the cascading failure chains down the line. Now here you can see that Trafalgar hydropower plant has a number of direct as well as indirect assets reliant on it. We can also see the new substation which we created and its own failure chain as well. So in preparation for the storm and to ensure all asset owners are aware of the potential issues, the operator can get a contact list of the impacted asset owners and begin contacting them to let them know that a hurricane is going to happen and they can make in place contingency plans. So for now, we do not have a list, but we can always go here and make a direct call and let the asset owners know of the potential impact. So this is the end of scenario 2. So I'm going to move forward to scenario 3. So scenario 3 is during the situation in which there is an incoming happen right now. So a cell phone tower reports that a cell phone tower supplying connectivity to the people of Mohoth currently has no backup generator. It was due to be repaired, but the repair crew shipped the wrong spare parts, and as likely the tower gonna fail. So the crew who are on site, they open the same mobile app to see what assets would be impacted by the tower's failure. Seeing the affected assets, they contact an operator to let them know that they can't get the tower repaired before the hurricane hits. So using the asset identifier that the crew gave them, the operator opens CAMS, and the asset identifier in this case is just the name of the asset. So the user would just, the operator would just search for it here. And then the operator finds the asset and displays the failure chain from that tower, which is this. So with the full picture in mind, the operator sends alerts to the owners of assets dependent on the cell phone tower so that they can take appropriate action for connectivity failure. So that is the end of scenario 3 as well. So that's demo. Any questions or comments? Do tell.
So yes, there are a number of questions. One question is, I mean, there are a number of comments also which say that this is very interesting, very useful. And one is asking, they want to know how it could be customized for a city level. So any ideas, or has it been done in the past?
So this was developed with Dominica in mind, but it can be easily customized to a city or community. It's very versatile. You just have to put in the asset location. So once you have the asset location on a map and you can map it, then it will give you wherever that is in the world. And then it'll plot it on the map. So if you have a electricity substation within a city, you can put in the location of it, give the details of that asset, and it will show up on the map in whichever city that is in. So as long as you're consistent with your locations of where the asset is located, then it's no problem at all. And you can go into a much more granular view, so you can see exactly where the links take place. But yeah, it's fully customizable to cities, to communities, to states, depending on how you want to use it in terms of failure chains. You could use it for a local community as much as you could for a city.
And I guess it depends on, so if it's a urban subunit, like city or a small town, basically what they need is an inventory of the assets that they want to feed into the system. And then,
Exactly. And one of the nice things about it is that it's dynamic. So you can go back in and you can change the links between assets, especially with things that might be mobile. So you might have, for example, a mobile generator that you use when an electricity substation goes down. And you might move that from place to place depending on the type of issue that you're facing. So you can just change the coordinates of that as you move it and relink it with local assets there, so that you know that you have the coverage and you can see that coverage on the map. And that can all be done dynamically as you go into the community. And you can build the picture slowly. It's not one where you have to start with everything. I need to have every single one of my assets already pre-ordained. You can start with a collection of a small collection like this, and you can start to see the links already and then build it up slowly so it becomes ever more useful to a wider variety of operators. And really, the idea is to allow everybody to have a consolidated view of what's happening in a time of crisis.
Okay, thanks. There's another question about the loading of the asset as demonstrated. So at that time, when you load an asset onto the system, do you detail how vulnerable that asset is to each relevant hazard that it may be exposed to, or is it assumed that every asset is equally vulnerable to every hazard?
Katie, do you want to give us a look at the loading asset again there?
Yes, so we have histories here, as you see. So it's so we could select a couple of hazard events there. So it's not just like one hazard. It can the same asset can be prone to multiple hazards there. So based on that, we could set grades as well. So that's how it works.
Yeah. So you can put in as many hazards as you wish there.
So you keep
so
on
obviously,
adding.
yeah. So obviously some assets, especially coastal assets, might be vulnerable to waves, to seas, to flooding, to other aspects, and you can put that in no problem. When you get back to the visualization though of the map, it goes asset by asset, or it goes, I mean, disaster by event by event, because it becomes very confusing if you layer on multiple events onto the map. So better to put that up one by one, and then you can print out the map and you can see exactly what's happening.
And that brings to the next question, because somebody has asked how well does the visualization work when there are hundreds of assets? For example, if you include roads, the power network, and the telecom, everything together to see the impact of maybe a cyclone or a hurricane.
Yeah, it'll work well. I mean, the way that we've designed it is that we can click on and off some of those links. It's definitely going to be busy, the visualization, if you've got hundreds of assets plus their failure chains and their links across. So it will be a busy visualization, but you can click those on and off so that you can get a view, and you can focus in on areas so that you can get a specific view of those impacts. But definitely it'll be busy if everything's switched on at the same time, but it'll hold up. You can have hundreds, thousands of assets visualized there without any issue.
Okay, so there's another interesting question about how this tool could be used. So one use is, of course, pre-hazard. So have the assets there and understand what is the vulnerability. But how could it be used post-hazard for the impact analysis, perhaps for build back better, for planning, for doing it better than before? So yeah, so any ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we haven't quite got to the point where we have functionality to do scenario planning. Let's say it's definitely something that we'd like to have built out in the future, whereby you could say, okay, well, what happens if this, if we have this sort of impact, and what happens here? But I think there's still plenty for Build Back Better. I think there's lots of opportunities for you to visualize exactly how failure chains operated. So if you have a event, say an earthquake or say a storm, and you see that actually I missed this chain of failure, then you can input it into the application and you can see it on the next occasion as you visualize, so that you're constantly learning, okay, there are failure chains that I hadn't seen because, when this bridge went down, it took down internet, it took down sewage line, it took down obviously transportation, but there was a lot more in that bridge than maybe some of the utilities were telling us. And now I have a better picture of exactly what the failure chain is there. And so when I'm repairing that bridge, I repair it with the idea that this is not just for cars and trucks to roll over, but actually a vital piece of infrastructure that carries a lot more than just the cars. It carries the internet, the electricity, the sewage, and that I need to build it back better, as you say.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's very good. And knowing what failed helps to understand how to build back better. And there was a similar question, so it doesn't have to be answered, but about Hargeisa city in Somaliland, where the main market was destroyed by fire. So this tool could also be useful in trying to understand what failed and how to make it build back better. There is a question about the security of the system. So saying that if the system was hacked, it would make an excellent target identification system for an adversary. So how do you guarantee the security of your system?
Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly one of the things that we had in mind as we were building it. So you have that granular access control, which allows you to make sure that only good actors have access to the limited amount of data that you wish to have them. So from that perspective of managing who has access, the administrators have total control over what bits of the data people can see, how they see it. So there's there's lots of ability to control from that. In terms of the global potential for being hacked, this is an open source tool, so it can be deployed on your local data center, one that you already have your government infrastructure on. It doesn't need to be deployed externally to that. So if you have already got shared resources, shared tools, and you want to deploy there where you feel secure, where you've built the security yourself, it's really very straightforward to do that. There's no issue there, and we can help you work that out. Otherwise, we host the cloud version on Google Cloud. So GCP obviously has the best security record of any of the global cloud providers. And from our perspective, there's nowhere safer to be than the global cloud providers. They spend enormous resources on making sure that that they're not going to be hacked, and they're very resilient in depth to making sure that that doesn't happen. And that's the reason that we're building there. If you want to build resilience, it makes sense to have everything local as well as everything in the cloud. Somebody was telling me about the volcanic eruption in the South Pacific, and how a lot of the internet connections were severed during that incident. So therefore, having anything in the cloud didn't make sense. And the way that we've designed CAMS is that there's very quick replication between all the data locally as well as in the cloud, so that people are able to have the snapshot of the data locally at the same time as having the resilience of the cloud. So you have that kind of duality to make sure that you have the data locally in the case of an incident, and that it's as secure as possible. But there's always a balance between security and access, and we try and get that right.
Thanks, Luke. There's a question, there's some interest from some of the participants, that we have more than 100 from around the world, about using this, the tool and going into the dashboard. So they are asking, are there any further capacity development opportunities? So, to familiarize with the tool, or how would you suggest somebody who's totally new, how would they start getting familiar with the tool?
Yeah, so they can just drop us a line, and we can set them up with a instance in the cloud, and they can start playing with it in terms of their local city or community or state. No problem at all. We can also do some further demos if people want to drill into something specific. So please just get in touch. All our contact details are available, and we'd be only too happy to give you a locally focused view of what the tool might look like in relation to your community or city.
Okay, good. So there is another question. Are there any limitations of the software? So are there any scenarios or contexts where you would not suggest to use this?
I mean, there are no real limitations that we're aware of to the software for the types of things that we're talking about here. We're we're fairly sure that it's very robust. We've developed it really from the ground up. So we've developed the data storage, the querying engine, all of the capacity to build out. So it's not dependent on any other external tools. And really, we control the full chain all the way down. So we're very confident about its operating parameters, and this is very it's very natural for us. I mean, it's built to go into a very small amount of technical detail. It's built on a very large scale, robust graph database, and that's what allows us to do those multi-hop links, where we can see what's connected to what very quickly and visualize that. So it means that if you were using a traditional database, it would become quite slow and difficult if you were looking to say, this asset is connected to this asset is connected to this asset is connected to this asset, a failure chain like that, because you have to go across tables. So you might have one very large table in a traditional database to another large table, and that can become slow if you do that across. But because we store all the information like a graph, so like a connected entity where all the connections are live, we can do those hops very easily. So we're not aware of any operating parameters where this wouldn't work for critical asset management. I think if you were trying to use it, for listing tourism sites, that might not be as appropriate, but for the tool that for what it's for, it works very, very well.
Thanks, Luke. There's another question about how the hazards are considered in this tool, and the questioner is asking, do we have to populate all the information about the hazard, and is that a big task on its own? Maybe you can show a demo on something, or just explain. Yeah.
Kitty, do you want to just go into the assets there again and show us how we put in the hazards?
So did you mean like hazard, for
information?
So
no, for example, a hurricane is coming, and you had demonstrated that, so to understand what is the magnitude, or I mean, if you want to create a scenario of a 7.8 earthquake or something like that. Right. So yeah, what kind of data do you need to put in?
So okay, so let me just explain. So this is the CAMS dashboard, right? So under the hood, our database is sitting in Terminus X. So we have all these events and grades. We have a schema which supports all this, so we entered it there. But we could definitely pull it up here as well, where you can add a sort of new event and a grade associated to it. For now, for the sake of this demo, we don't have it. But imagine that we have an earthquake. So if I'm going to create this new asset, for example, let's go and create it in the asset history, or there is something called as applicable hazards also. Like what I mean by applicable hazards are those hazards to which this new asset is mostly prone. So if we do applicable hazard here, we could go here, and I think we have earthquake here. Do we? Does anybody see earthquake? I don't see earthquake. So I guess we haven't added earthquake yet. Okay, example for earthquake, I'm gonna add, say, a tornado or something. We could definitely give the grade here based on whatever the level is. I'm not really sure, so I'm just gonna enter 3 there, and that's it. So you create a new asset, and then you let's maybe try demonstrating it. Let me just create this new asset. Maybe let's just make it as an airport or something, right? Let me enter the mandatory things. So what's the name of this new asset?
Just to say about those mandatory fields that Kitty's entering there, those you can see that those are the last maintained. So the last time that asset was maintained and the last time it was modified. So you are getting a picture of exactly the maintenance record of the application or the asset as well.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna enter junk stuff. So I would need new coordinates, definitely. So let's just open Google Maps or something and get some coordinate. Let's get Dublin, for example, because we are in Ireland. Gotta choose a real place. Okay, that's fine. I will just choose that, whatever that place is. Sorry. So let me just add whatever. I don't need that much. Okay. Okay, so this is the new asset which I am gonna create, and I'm gonna link it to tornadoes because unfortunately I don't have earthquakes right now. And let's just go and create this. Hold on. What level was this? Tornadoes and grade 3. Cool. Let's see. Okay, so this is the new asset which we created. So if we go to home there, and let me see if tornadoes are there in this list, because I haven't. Okay, let's see. Okay, that asset is in Dublin, so that the zoom didn't change. So let's just go and search for that asset in Dublin, which is somewhere here. I don't see it. Maybe I entered the wrong coordinates there. Not really sure. Okay, probably I should get a proper nice place. Let's do let me create this asset real quick. Sorry about that. Right, and let me get that. I think I missed a point there or something earlier. I'm not really sure. Maybe I missed the decimal.
You might have missed the point, yeah.
Okay, so applicable hazard. Oh no, we are basing our events based on asset history, not applicable hazard. That's what I was missing. So we could make a new filter with applicable hazards as well. So let me just go and create this guy. I'm going to associate this with I don't know, hurricane because I think I have information for that mostly. So, okay, so that's Dominic. I'm hoping that would appear there. Wait, because I have set everything based on the map of Dominica. I'm wondering, I'm sorry, but I can't demonstrate that right now. Nobody sees that, right?
Anyway, the idea is fairly clear about how you enter the assets and how you set the hazards there.
Yeah, I think I've set
basically. Sorry, I mean, basically, you use the data from, for example, if it's hurricane, cyclone, you use the data from the Met Office. And if it is earthquake, then of course it is, you can't predict. So you're just using scenario. So you are looking at, okay, I have these assets. If there's an earthquake of 6.5, how would it, what are the possible, like doing a stress test, you understand what would be the impacts, right? Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're working on now is how we make the life of the operator a little bit easier so that they can have all of their assets and other information contained within a Excel document and automatically import it into the system, so that if you have utilities or other operators that are using it, that they can then just output to a specific formatted Excel, and then that then just gets regularly eaten by the system. So that's kind of what we're working on right now, just to try and make it, that data input piece, a lot more straightforward, especially if you're trying to build a regular cycle of data ingestion for third-party organizations.
Okay, so we have another question that have you partnered with the government in the past with this tool?
So this is built in partnership with the government of Dominica. Yeah, so we're working very closely with the government there, with the Ministry of Planning, and with some climate resilience organizations locally. So government backed climate resilience organizations in Dominica. And we're looking to kind of increase the number of cities and governments that we're working with to roll it out for more and more.
Okay, so another question, does or could the software do any further analysis? For example, can it pick out or prioritize top key assets which are important for a community or a city's resilience? And why they are asking is because this could be very important for urban resilience planning.
Yes. So we give a list of the assets by excuse me, by the number of links that they have. So we use the number of critical links as a proxy for the most important, and then provide that as a list, a ranked list, to see exactly what the most vulnerable assets are in any specific scenarios. We are keen to add additional data analysis behind the scenes so people can do ever more detailed planning. But for the moment, it's ranked list to show you which of the assets have the most, which are most important by number of links, and then readouts depending on what specific hazards you're looking at.
So there was a question earlier from a participant from Somaliland, and they are very much interested in the contact. So Luke, maybe you can type out the contact for this for Mr. Mohammed. And then there is a question again, because there seems to be a lot of interest on the capacity building associated with this. So is there any online course or training material manual available to self-learn the tool?
Yes.
And if so, where?
Yes, it's under development and will be available on the website, which I'm sharing right now in the very near future. So the tool is designed to be self-learned. It's we tried to make it as intuitive as possible, but obviously it requires some additional documentation, which we're building right now. And I'm just going to put in my email address in case anybody wants to talk to me. Very easy, luke@terminusdb.com.
Thanks for that. And there's another question in the failure chain. Can the tool consider time-based failure, that this asset will fail in X number of days?
Yeah, I actually saw that question as it came up, and that's a great question. I really was happy to see it, because it's something that we're planning and building now, whereby you put in an asset at the beginning and you get some of those traditional asset management functionalities, whereby I need to maintain this generator in 6 months. Alert me when I get to the point of maintenance of this generator in 6 months. And then another one to say that this asset will fail, because it requires a specific copper part that fails every 36 months, and give me a countdown and an alert to tell me when that's failure, or when that failure chain is going to kick off, and give me an ability to see all of those time-dependent failure chains as well. So not just because, of course, we know that a hazard can cause a failure, but just corrosion and obsolescence can cause failure as well. So that's very much that time-bound failure is what we're looking at right now. So not in the tool yet, but to the top of our minds. And so I'm happy to hear that people are also worried about that.
Also, kind of linked to this is, can the tool demonstrate what vulnerabilities the asset has towards a certain hazard? So maybe to some extent could be linked with maintenance, for example. So if the tool is not maintained in the last 6 months, it's more vulnerable. But any other point you'd like to say here?
Yeah, I suppose the way that we represent that now is that, say, for example, here you see that the tools, and it's interesting because these would be the sort of things that we'd be very interested in engaging with cities about and communities about how they'd use that sort of functionality. Because the way we think about it now is, if you look at the example that's on the screen here, these are all of the assets in Dominica that are vulnerable to category 3 and below hurricanes. And so what we would think of, say, if a tool becomes older, it might become vulnerable to category 1 hurricanes. So it would require a less strong hurricane for it to be vulnerable. And that's the way that we'd represent that now. But definitely to think about how we'd have some sliding of vulnerability over time is something that we'd be really interested in talking to people about, and how they think about that in terms of asset management.
And then there is a more like a comment that there is this classification of hazards by UNDRR, and and which is kind of approved by an interagency group. So maybe what they are suggesting is maybe use that classification in the tool, so then it will, it would be good to do that.
Yeah, I think
That's standard.
Yeah, I think we've tried to use that. I think we took it from some of the Dominica documentation around that they developed with the UNDRR. So we have used that where we're kind of, some of the levels of hazard we're still clarifying, but we're happy to make those sorts of changes as we go.
Okay, and then there's a question on this tool could also be used by property builders, for example, when they are developing their complexes, or like many countries, the smart cities project, there are property builders are involved in developing a housing complex, and then they also have, so it could be kind of a subset of the city, but in private hands. What do you think?
Yeah, I know no reason why not to have as many different actors involved, using it, inputting data. I mean, it's really, it's versatile. So it's really up to a city or community or state to how they wish to proceed, whether they want to allow, specific developers to have access in so that they can provide their information, or whether they want to input their information for them because they don't want to give them access into the tool because they're not comfortable with them necessarily seeing all the data. But again, that's flexible. Once you're the administrator and once you're in control of the tool, then you can provide those levels of access for others. And really the best case scenario is that you have the most complete picture of all of the assets that are going to be impacted by an adverse event. And that includes private sector ones, because we know very well that housing is an absolutely essential and critical asset.
Okay, so I think we have come to the end of the questions. So lots of questions, shows the interest. And just to remind everyone again, this is a tool which is available also through the MCR 2030. So thanks, Luke and Kitty, and I hand over back to Mike.
Thank you so much. It has been a very interesting presentation and the tools, and I think it's very well received by the audience as well. And so with this, we would like to thank you all for joining us, and we also would like to ask for your support to fill in just a minute of the post-webinar survey, so that we hear the feedback from you for our further improvement in a subsequent webinar sessions. And we dropped the link already in the chat. And thank you, Luke, and thank you, Kitty, for joining us today, and hope to see you soon, again soon. So have a good day, good night, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.